Is Mike Vrabel Mr. Steal Your Job? That's the question that a lot of people are asking right now because Mike Vrabel is doing the same stuff Mike Vrabel has always done. But now, it's starting to become something that people notice more often, right? Mike Vrabel's on the sidelines. He's greeting guys after he comes in and out. Like this is stuff Mike Vrabel was doing like at home games. Now he's doing it at road games. And I have to admit, him doing that at road games, it feels suspicious, right? And a lot of people had their eyebrows perked at this whole Mike Vrabel joining the Browns coaching staff thing from the very beginning. So they're kind of looking for any reason to think that Mike Vrabel is trying to steal Kevin Stefanski's job. Well, first to figure out if that's possible, because Kevin might get fired this year, right? Let's look at some of the projected job opportunities for Mike Vrabel and see if like any of these are more attractive than the Cleveland Browns. The Saints are going to be open. They're already open. They have an interim head coach right now. Would the Saints be an attractive job for Mike Vrabel? I do not think so, right? Like, I don't think it's a more attractive job than the Browns. I understand they just beat the Browns, but their cap problems are much more problematic and harder to work around than the Cleveland Browns cap problems are. And like you're kind of locked into Derek Carr. I don't know how he feels about Derek Carr. But if he likes Derek Carr, then obviously that raises the Saints' chances. But I don't think the Saints are a team that he's going to be jumping to or like excited about. Same thing goes for the Jets, old quarterback, a lot of contracts, a lot of old offensive linemen on contracts. The Jaguars, you got Trevor Lawrence, so Trevor Lawrence is attractive, right? The question is, would the Jaguars be trying to hire somebody who's a defensive head coach or a head coach known for their defensive prowess like Mike Vrabel? I think the answer to that is no. If you're hiring somebody to be your head coach after Doug Peterson, you're probably looking for somebody with a better offensive grip on what Trevor Lawrence wants to do. So what I think happens with the Jaguars job is that they go out, they hire an offensive guy, whether that be Ben Johnson or whatever hot coordinator name is out there. I think they roll with that and go with that. So I do not think that the Jags would be that interested in Mike Vrabel. Would Mike Vrabel be interested in them? I think there'd be a chance. Would the Jaguars be interested in Mike Vrabel? I don't think there's a great chance of that happening here. The Bears are another team that would be interesting, right? They might fire Matt Eberflus. They might want to bring a new offensive guy in, but again, I think they're looking for somebody on the offensive side of the ball. The one wild card I will throw in here that I think would be a team that would definitely throw a wrench in, like if the Browns actually had a plan, and I don't know if it's the case that the Browns are actually trying to maneuver this. The one team that could throw a wrench in that, I think, is the Cincinnati Bengals. Because the Bengals' problems this year aren't the offense. With Joe Burrow, you assume, and Jamar Chase, you assume that you can hire anybody to be offensive coordinator. You could be fine. You're not trying to fix or get more out of Joe Burrow. He's statistically speaking, at least, he's an MVP candidate. What you're trying to fix with the Bengals is the defense. So you might think hiring Mike Vrabel would fix that if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. The one thing to keep in mind with the Cincinnati Bengals, they hate firing coaches because they hate paying coaches to not coach. And if they fire Zach Taylor, they would absolutely have to pay Zach Taylor to not coach. And they don't ever want to do that. So that's why I don't think it's likely that they fire Zach Taylor because he had a down year, especially since this is his first down year with Joe Burrow, especially since he's gone to back-to-back conference championship games and the first Super Bowl appearance they've had since the 80s. I don't think they're going to fire Zach Taylor. I know a lot of Bengal fans want Zach Taylor fired, but I don't think they go with him. And if I'm the Bengals and I'm looking for a defensive head coach to go for, I'm going to be honest with you, Brian Flores is a lot more attractive to me if you're the Bengals than Mike Vrabel, whose last two defenses weren't super great. Brian Flores would make sense here, right? So you look at the opportunities, and of the jobs that could open up, even our wild card one. Bengals feel like they would go in a different direction. Like they would probably go with like a Brian Flores if they can go get him. And if you're Brian Flores and they offer you the chance to coach Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and fix that defense, you're going to jump at that opportunity, right? The Jaguars, they're going to try to go and get an established offensive coordinator, more than likely. The same thing with the Bears. Both have young enough quarterbacks that they're trying to get the most out of, and they don't believe the current guy has done a great job of doing that. They're probably going to go offensive coordinator guy there and there. So I don't think the Jags or the Bears are going to be interested in Mike Vrabel. That leaves the Jets and the Saints. The Jets would make sense, but I don't think the Jets are that much more appealing than the Cleveland Browns, if they are more appealing at all. Again, offensive line cooked and under contract for a while. And Aaron Rodgers, notoriously difficult to work with, just got his last coach fired. Aaron Rodgers does not make you feel like you want to work there, right? Because you got to keep his homeboys around. Like, I don't know. Doesn't feel like Mike Vrabel and Aaron Rodgers would be a clashing of egos that would work great. But I can see Mike Vrabel being interested in that one. And the Saints job, the Saints usually like to go internal with these things. I think there's a chance they just promote Clint Kingsbury. Clint Kubiak. I think there's a chance they promote Clint Kubiak to head coach, or they go like the Cliff Kingsbury route or something like that. I still think they lean the offensive guy there. So like if you're the Browns, if you're Mike Vrabel, right, and you're plotting this move to take over the Browns, is it feasible? Because does Mike Vrabel have to do this to get a job in 2025? I think it is feasible that he might be plotting to do this, just from if you look at his motivations, because there's not going to be a lot of teams looking for him. There's going to be some teams looking for head coaches, but a lot of these teams are going to be leaning offensive guy for their head coaches. Definitely going to get some interviews, definitely going to get some interest, but Bill Belichick's also on the market as a defensive guy. Brian Flores is on the market as a defensive guy. There's just a lot more names out there that I can see teams going with that aren't retreads of somebody who already worked. And a lot of these teams are either trying to get younger or better. And I think the only team that makes sense is like maybe the Jets. And the Jets are an interesting situation. I can see Mike Vrabel looking at this job and saying, hey, this is the job I want because I'm from here. Well, he's not from here, but he grew up a Browns fan. He's from Ohio. Not the same thing as being from Cleveland, but he's from Ohio. He grew up a Browns fan, and he might think to himself he wants to be the guy that brings the Browns back to glory. Maybe that motivated him to come back. Maybe his initial motivation for coming here was, hey, I just want to help the Browns get to this goal I thought they could reach based on what they were doing in the offseason. It didn't work out that way. But now, the opportunity might come to where he has the chance to coach the Browns. I do think that would be attractive to Mike Vrabel. What I don't think Mike Vrabel is angling for is that damn interim head coach job. He don't want it. Nobody wants that. Mike Vrabel has no reason to want the interim head coach job. I'm telling you this right now. If you think Mike Vrabel been angling all of this to get the interim head coach job, he don't want it. That's the worst job in America. You give that job to somebody that you don't mind firing. You don't give that job to somebody you actually trying out. And if you Mike Vrabel, you have done enough in the NFL to where you are not going to take an interim head coach job. Absolutely. When you don't have to, too. Like, it's not like he defensive coordinator, and if somebody get fired, he got to step up. No, man. He's just like a special assistant to somebody. He don't got to be the head coach if Kevin gets fired. And I think he took this job understanding that Kevin's not going to get fired in the middle of the season this year. And I don't think Kevin's going to get fired in the middle of the season. Unless Jimmy goes like on a spectacular Jimmy tantrum, if the Browns lose Thursday to the Steelers, which is always on the table. But unless he does something like that, I think Kevin's going to keep his job. And I think even if he goes on a Jimmy tantrum, somebody will separate him from the decision-making mechanisms and long enough for him to come down from that anger and not make that decision. So I don't think That's going to happen. I don't think the plan is to fire Kevin and give Mike Vrabel an interim run, because I think people are greatly overestimating the appeal of taking the interim head coach job for Mike Vrabel. Taking the head coaching job at the end of the season, after the season is over, and they're looking for a new head coach, maybe. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense for Mike Vrabel to be the new head coach for the Cleveland Browns if they fire Kevin Stefanski at the end of the season. But taking the interim coaching job when there's 10, well, not 10 games left, there's 7 games left, it looks like an absolute slaughterhouse for this football team for the last 7 games. And you're Mike Vrabel. You absolutely don't have to prove to people that you can coach. What is the benefit for Mike Vrabel to take this job right now as the interim coach? Absolutely no shot. That's what he's trying to do, right? Like, the benefit for Mike Vrabel taking, and I'm being very specific here, an interim job. I think he would take the job if the Browns offered it to him at the end of the season. But the interim job specifically, it has no upside. Like, I'm not joking. Let's say the Browns get ran on Thursday night. They fire Kevin Stefanski on Friday, and they give Mike Vrabel the job. All right, Mike, you got to play the Denver Broncos on national TV, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs, and you probably going to lose all them games. And if you lose all those games, let's say if Mike Vrabel loses out or goes like 1 and whatever in those last games, because you usually win the game after you fire your coach, right? Like, let's say Mike Vrabel wins 1 game or 2 games after that. People will look at him as, hey, that's the dude who got fired from Tennessee, and then he got another shot in Cleveland and lost a bunch of games again. That would not make his stock higher to any team that's not the Cleveland Browns is looking to hire him. And if you are Mike Vrabel and you take the interim job, the best case scenario is that you win out. But if you win out, guess what, buddy? You're the Browns head coach. A job you could have probably had without having to be the interim. The interim job's just not for somebody like Mike Vrabel. It makes no sense for somebody like Mike Vrabel to take that job. If you look at some of these coordinators who have a good chance to be able to go where they want to as a head coach, right? Brian Flores is a good example of that. They usually stay as low key as possible in that move before they take a bigger job or go out into the head coach market. Not Mike Vrabel, but Brian Flores took a linebacking coach's job, and he took it with Mike Tomlin. The reason he did that was because he wasn't trying to become somebody's interim head coach. No good candidate wants to become an interim head coach. That is for the linebacking coaches, the positional coaches, like guys who are never going to get a chance through traditional means. That is a job that they want, right? But if you're a guy who can get a job as a head coach without having to do that, you absolutely will avoid being an interim head coach. He is not trying to put himself in the line of succession to be an interim head coach. I promise you that if the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski, they will put Jim Schwartz as the interim head coach before they go to Mike Vrabel, because not something Mike Vrabel would want to do. It doesn't make sense from his perspective to do it because it's a lame duck spot to be the interim head coach. And why do a job before they pay you to do it if you don't have to do it? Mike Vrabel don't got to audition to interview to be the Browns head coach. Mike Vrabel don't need a foot in the door or something like that, or get some experience coaching. Mike Vrabel has coached a lot of times. If you want to hire Mike Vrabel as a coach, you don't need a sneak preview of Mike Vrabel as the coach. He didn't end that toxically in Tennessee. He'll be fine. He's not going to take an interim job. So what is Mike Vrabel doing here? I think, honestly, like, my read on this situation is that Mike Vrabel just came here because he loves the Browns. He was a Browns fan. He loves Ohio. And, you know, he likes being around football in Ohio. And he thought, hey, man, I got an off year. I know Jim Schwartz. I'm from Ohio. I love football in Ohio. They're offering something. I'll take it, right? And he just took it for a year, thinking I'll get a job opportunity after it. I don't think in his mind he was thinking, I'm going to take Kevin Stefanski's job. Now, over the last few weeks, I think it's gotten in his mind, hey, you know, this job might become available. And if they fire Kevin, this might be a job I want. So let me put my best foot forward as I'm being an assistant coach. And that's why you're seeing him work with the offensive line all of a sudden. That's why you're seeing him, dapping up and showing up the road games now. Like, I think the alarm bells went off that, hey, this job could become available. He's about to go under 300 likely. Coaches usually don't survive going under 300 for an individual season. He got fired for almost going under 300. He knows what it is. So he's probably looking at this like, hey, I didn't mean to take his job. But if they're going to be hiring, this is definitely one of the spots I want to land at because it's either this or the Jets. I would rather land here than the Jets. Now, that's a debatable spot, but I think the edge of Mike Vrabel actually growing up and wanting to root for the Browns and stuff makes this a lot more appealing than the Jets do, despite what you might feel about Aaron Rodgers or how he might feel about Aaron Rodgers or anything like that. I think he sees something that can be redeemed and there's something for him to accomplish that he would want to accomplish that's deeper than just being a head coach again that Cleveland can offer. So that's what I think is going on with the Mike Vrabel situation. I don't think he came here with a nefarious intent, right? This isn't, what was the dude's name? He was the offensive coordinator, Hugh Jackson's last year. Haley. This is not a Todd Haley situation where Todd Haley agreed to become the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns absolutely to sabotage Hugh Jackson and take his job and become the head coach. And we know that Todd Haley did that because he got fired when Hugh got fired too, because they smelt that thing coming from across the room. They promoted Greg Williams to head coach instead of Todd Haley, right? And Todd Haley was in a position where he would want to become an interim head coach because people did not believe in him as a head coach. So it makes sense that he would have to do that. Where Todd Haley is in his career and where Mike Vrabel is two different places. Mike Vrabel don't have to become your interim head coach. I don't think he did this to try to snuff out Kevin Stefanski. But I do think he's seeing an opportunity. And he's putting his best foot forward now, for sure. That's my thoughts on the whole thing. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.